In this video, we're tackling the what, why, how, and when of everything that you need to know about reeds when you're just starting out on the clarinet.
My name is Josh Gu, and I'm taking my years of experience learning, teaching, and performing, and sharing all of my best clarinet and music tips so you can get more out of your practice, and most importantly, have fun. You can learn more about all of my many resources at QuickStartClarinet.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get notified when I post new videos.
I hope that you've been enjoying this Clarinet Fundamentals series where I'm doing a bit of a deep dive on one topic at a time when it comes to starting out on the clarinet or just general foundational fundamental things that are important wherever you are in your clarinet journey, whether this is your first day or your 10th year of playing. This is all the best and most important stuff you need to know to have a great sound. Check the link in the description for the whole playlist of all of these videos where you can see each of the topics that I've covered. And in this one, we're talking about reeds and what you should be starting at a beginner, when to be moving up in reed strength, all of that good stuff. I wanted to tackle reeds pretty early in this series because it's one of those things that can really cause a lot of problems if you're playing on the wrong strength reed or the wrong type, or all of that kind of stuff can really get you into trouble and cause frustration early on in your playing. The first thing to know about reeds is they are the sound of the instrument. The reason why the clarinet sounds like a clarinet is the way that the reed vibrates against the mouthpiece. If the reed was different, it would sound like a different instrument. So it's super duper important for getting the sound you want. And in my opinion, the reed is the single most important piece of equipment on the whole instrument, which on one hand is nice because it's a little bit more affordable to replace a reed. But on the other hand, it's kind of a struggle because you have to always be messing with reeds and trying to find the best reed. But I want to start by talking about what reeds are good to be starting on and where to be going from there. And of course, throughout this video, there's probably going to be some mention of mouthpieces as well, because the reed matching with the mouthpiece is so important. So starting with the reed mouthpiece pairing, every mouthpiece is a little bit different. The way it opens, the way that the reed lays on it. The most important variable for us to be thinking about is the tip opening. If you look at your mouthpiece, you'll notice it has a little bit of a curve to it, and then the reed lays flat against it. And how much it curves is the tip opening, this distance between the reed and the mouthpiece. So a small tip opening is going to have less distance. A big tip opening will have more distance. And you can imagine if we want the reed to be vibrating against that tip opening, the bigger the tip opening, the more soft and flexible the reed needs to be to vibrate across that gap. So that's a little bit complicated to be thinking about. If you're a beginner, don't worry about the tip opening of your mouthpiece so much, but know that every mouthpiece is going to want a different strength of reed. I'll put a link in the description to the Van Doren mouthpiece chart, which is a really nifty resource where it has all of the different Van Doren mouthpieces. It lists their tip openings and some other details about them, and then also the Van Doren reed strength that they recommend to go with that mouthpiece. And that's what I want to talk about for you here, is that every mouthpiece has a sort of range of kind of ideal reed strengths for what that mouthpiece wants, with the closed tip opening mouthpieces wanting harder reeds and the more open tip mouthpieces wanting softer reeds. So you can look at that chart and get an idea of what you should be aiming for. But if you're just starting out, you may not want to start at those reed strengths. So let me explain a little bit about where you should be if you're a beginner just starting out. First of all, some instruments come with reeds. Most reeds that come with the instruments are not good and probably not worth playing on even starting out. Maybe if it's your first day, you just got your instrument and you really want to try it out and you haven't had a chance to get to a music store and get a new box of reeds, you can use them to try it out, but you'll want to get some sort of real reeds or reeds that come separate from the instrument as soon as possible. A great brand that I recommend for beginners is the Van Doren Juno reeds. They're intended for beginners. They're a little bit more affordable and they work really well for beginners. Now, with that kind of beginner reed in mind, the strengths are going to run a little bit softer than other reeds. That's one of the fun things about reeds, is from brand to brand and cut to cut, the reeds are different strengths even if they have the same number. So a Van Doren Juno 2, a Rico Orange Box 2, a D'Addario Reserve 2, and a Van Doren Blue Box 2 will all be a little bit different strengths. So you can't expect to just get one number from a different brand and have it feel exactly the same. So I want to give sort of a pathway that you can maybe follow as a beginner. So maybe your first day, before you've had a chance, you can use any reeds that come with your clarinet, but no more than one day on those. Then for your starter reeds, just as a generic recommendation, I would recommend the Van Doren Juno 2.5s to start. And if you watched my embouchure video in this series, then you should have a nice strong embouchure and the 2.5s won't feel too hard at all. I'd recommend playing on those for a month to 3 months just to sort of get a start to playing. The nice thing about starting on a softer reed, and the reason why we start on softer reeds, is it makes the notes really easy to come out without having to do anything crazy, without having to have great embouchure support or great air support. So you can get an easy start to the instrument. But after 1 to 3 months, you're going to be starting to develop stronger air support, stronger embouchure, and especially as you want to start moving up to higher notes over the break and things like that, you're going to want a stronger reed that has more resistance and more support and can stay vibrating at those higher frequencies that it's going to need to vibrate. So once you're going to some higher notes, or sort of 1 to 3 months into playing, I would recommend moving up. And you can have two options here. You can stick with the Van Doren Junos if that's really working well for you and you're really liking them. Go to a size 3. Or you could go to a traditional Van Doren, or I also really like the D'Addario Reserve reeds. I would probably stick to Van Doren Traditional or V12. Those are both great cuts. Or the D'Addario Reserves at a size 2.5 also. So notice we're going from a Juno 2.5 to the Van Doren or D'Addario 2.5, which is the same number, but is going to be a little harder right off of the bat. And I would do that for 3 months up to 6 months or a year of playing on that, still probably a little bit on the softer side, but solid enough that it's going to work for most things. Once you start getting into higher notes, like the upper clarion register, which is the G above the staff to the C right above the staff, once you're going for those higher notes, that's when your strength of reed is really going to matter, and you might need something a little bit stronger. After 6 months to a year of playing or so, then I would really look into those mouthpiece charts and start moving towards the recommended reed strength for your mouthpiece. So if your mouthpiece recommends a 3.5 to 4, for example, then you'll want to move up from that 2.5 to a 3, and then maybe to a 3.5. The 3.5 might work for you, but you might even need to go to a 4 to really find that sweet spot. You can check out my video on testing to know if you have too hard or too soft of a reed up there. Now, as you're moving through different strengths of reeds, it's going to feel a little bit weird because your body has gotten used to playing on what strength that you're on. So when you move up to a harder strength, it's going to feel harder. The sound's going to be fuzzier. It's going to feel like you're going to have to blow harder to get the sound out. That's all completely normal. But what I would recommend is, we often think that we kind of want to gradually transition. And if you're playing in long rehearsals or something like that and the harder reed is really tiring you out, it's okay to play the softer reed in those long rehearsals. But for the most part, I would recommend switching kind of cold turkey. So when you go from the Juno 2.5 to the Van Doren Traditional 2.5, I would recommend just switching and sticking with it. And there's a couple things that will be important. Every reed in the box is different. It's going to feel a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit different strength. There's other characteristics to the reed that's going to make it better or worse. So try a lot of them. You might go from the 2.5 Juno, which feels good and comfortable. You pull out your first 2.5 of the Van Doren Traditional, and it just feels terrible, and you think, oh, I'm not ready for this. These reeds are bad. I'm going to stick with my comfort zone. Don't do that. Sort of force yourself to go for the harder reed. Live with it. Try several of them from the box to find the one that feels the best right away. And then you can work with the reeds that are feeling better out of the box, and maybe eventually work up to the reeds that didn't feel as good out of the box, or just throw them away, because sometimes that's how reeds are, is they're just never good, unfortunately. But do it kind of in that cold turkey approach where you go on to the new reed strength, you stick with it, you work with the reeds in that reed strength to find the ones that work. If every reed in the box feels terrible after a week or two, then maybe it's too hard and you can go back to the other one and stay there for a while. But force yourself onto this harder ones. The other part of this too is make sure that you aren't warming up on the reeds that you're used to and then trying the new one, because your body is already calibrated for the day to the softer reed. So every single harder reed is going to feel bad. Try the harder reed, start on it fresh at the beginning of your practice, warm up with it, try to find the sweet spot with that harder reed, and then go from there. Phew, okay, there's a lot of reed information, a lot of reed strength. Reeds are really nuanced, which is why I wanted to make this video for you. But there's a few more things that I want to get into. So this has to do with breaking in and rotating reeds. If you're playing on synthetic reeds, like Legers, for example, then you don't have to worry about breaking them in, luckily. And it's totally fine to play on synthetic reeds, even from the very beginning, if you want. They're a little more expensive, so in that regard, it may not be worth it, but they do tend to last a little bit longer, so it's up to you. If you have a teacher, talk with your teacher about starting on whatever reeds they think is best for you. But if you're playing on cane reeds, even if you're very starting out, I have just a quick break-in process that I think is really worthwhile. So when it comes to breaking in reeds, we have to remember that they're organic material. It's made out of cane, which is a bamboo-like wood, and our saliva is there to break down organic material. So when we're soaking our reeds in our saliva, it's soaking into the reed, it's breaking it down. And my philosophy of breaking in reeds is once the inner part of the reed breaks down, it loses its springiness, it no longer vibrates, and we no longer get good sound out of it. So the goal of breaking in the reeds is to let the saliva sort of break down the outside parts of the reed and sort of seal that up before it's soaking the saliva in very deep. So the very simple process for doing that is to just make sure that you aren't playing on a new reed for a long time. What I generally recommend is when it's a very new reed, wet it in your mouth like normal. You could also wet it in water if you like, either way. Don't get it super duper wet in your mouth or in the water, because remember, it's all sort of open and porous and it's soaking in water, just like when it was alive and the water and nutrients were flowing up and down the tube of cane. We want to soak it just a little bit so sort of the outside is just damp, then play it for just a little bit, 30 seconds, a minute, no more than 5 minutes for the first several times that you play it. And that's pretty much all I do, is for the first several times, don't get it too wet and don't play it for too long. After about a week or 2 weeks of doing that, you might notice that the surface of the reed feels a little bit smoother. It feels a little bit less porous, and that means that it's starting to seal up. And once it gets to that point, then you can work it into your regular rotation. Now for rotating reeds, I do recommend that you do this whether you're on cane reeds or synthetic reeds. It's definitely more important if you're on cane, but I think it's also quite important if you're on synthetic reeds. And what this is you should have, I think, at least 4 reeds. Personally, I generally have 10 to 15 reeds that I'm rotating through. I've seen other professionals who rotate through like dozens or 50 or maybe even 100 reeds that they have going that they're working on and trying out. I'm not quite that crazy, but I think 4 is very easily and manageable, even if you're just starting out. And the idea here is that we're giving the reeds a little bit of a rest. I think it's also helpful for developing our embouchure and our air support to be working with different reeds each day as well. So the way that this works, you have one reed that you play the first day, then you put it away. Second day you play reed number 2. Third day you play reed number 4. Third day you play reed number 3. Fourth day you play reed number 4. And then on the 5th day, you come back to reed number 1. And you just go through that rotation about a day at a time. If you're playing a ton, you could maybe do your morning hour-long practice on reed number 1, your afternoon hour-long practice on reed number 2, if you're playing more. But the idea is that we want to let the reeds rest a little bit between so that they can, again, dry out a little bit more and aren't constantly getting soaked day after day after day, because it's going to soak in that saliva and start breaking down the inside of the reed sooner that way. And even if you're on synthetic reeds, I think this is also important because you'll be playing on a different reed every day. You'll be feeling the different resistance and response of the reed. So your brain will be learning faster what you need to do with your air and embouchure to get the best sound out of the reed by sort of introducing this desired difficulty of the reed being a little bit different every day. The thing that we absolutely don't want to do is grab a new reed out of the box, soak it for a long time, slap it on the mouthpiece, play it for a long time, play that reed every day over and over and over again, because one, by not breaking it in, it's going to break down a lot faster. Number 2, you probably won't notice it breaking down because you're playing the same reed every day, so you're sort of used to how that reed feels. So as it's gradually changing over time, you're just used to it and know what it's going to feel like. And then eventually it's going to get so soft that it's not going to be working the way that you want anymore, or you're going to break it and chip it and have to replace it. Then you're going to put a new reed on that's the same strength, same brand, should feel more or less the same, and it's going to feel completely different, because when a reed's new, it's most resistant, and as you play it, it breaks down and gets softer and softer. So that 2.5 that you've played on without breaking in for the last month straight is probably like a 1.5 by the time you break it and have to put a new 2.5 on, and that new 2.5 feels like a completely different strength and doesn't feel good. So that's the beauty of rotating, is that you always have different reeds that you're experimenting with and feeling, and you'll also find more great reeds that way because you'll just be going through more reeds. So I recommend for a beginner, probably plan on breaking in a new reed every 2 weeks once you have your 4 that are in rotation, and then you can just take the oldest one out of rotation, or the one that feels the worst, out of rotation, and then theoretically you'll have 4 reeds that feel pretty good, that you like pretty well, but are still a little different, so you can always have something to compare to for what a good reed is. So I think that's all that I have for starting out with reeds. I know this is a ton of information, but I think it's some good stuff for you to hopefully be thinking about if you're starting out, or again at any point along your clarinet journey. Let me know if you have any questions about reeds in the comments below, because there's a lot of nuance and a lot of different aspects of reeds that we can certainly discuss there, and I'm always happy to help you to feel more secure and comfortable and confident and easy when it comes to playing the clarinet. So thanks so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in another one. And last but not least, a huge heartfelt thank you to the Dennersons. This is like the QuickStart Clarinet family who supports the channel and helps to make everything that I do possible. If you would like to support the channel and get some awesome rewards in return, where we can work one-on-one over video and you can have my full support moving forward on your clarinet journey, then go to quickstartclarinet.com/supporter.